Okay, so we are here tonight to talk about Expedition Racing 101. The idea for this panel was to really bring together a group of folks who took on Endless Mountains 2022 as their first multi-day race and lived to tell the tale. And I have to say, every single team except one, and that one happened to be one of the most experienced adventure racing teams in the world, crossed the finish line at Endless Mountains 2022. So there were 50 different people that we could have asked to come on and share that experience about getting to the start line and then getting from the start line to the finish. But we thought it would be really valuable for folks who
Big
are
Brothers
contemplating
watching us.
their first race to hear from first timers, to hear from those who saw the race as an opportunity to test their mettle and take the next step in adventure racing, and hear what they did that worked well, what they did that they wish they hadn't done, and kind of what reflections they might offer now, 4 months after the race, for folks that are contemplating going forth next year. So we have here Meg Hammond, Megan Moyer, Jason Glenn, and Matt Palumbo. And you guys are across my screen in that order. So I am gonna just ask you to go in that order and offer folks a few sentences, a couple paragraphs about who you are and what your adventure racing bio is. And then I have some questions prepared. We had one question already posed to us on Facebook. And then for those of you who have questions that you'd like these folks to answer, just post them in the chat and we will go through them as we go. I anticipate that we won't be here for more than an hour, so we will cram as much as we can into that hour. Meg, why don't you start us off?
Hey, Meg Hammond here from New Jersey. I started a couple years back. My first AR was the Stockville. My most has been 36s, 136 and a couple 24s, but I had never done a 5-day. I was interested and asked Brent and Abby, and they said, advice, give it a shot. It's a short little history with orienteering, mostly a long-term orienteering, but not a lot of AR races under my belt.
Awesome, thanks, Meg. Megan.
Yeah, maybe similarly, I've always been an athlete. I played hard sports, rugby. I used to be a runner, but I don't think I've ever run more than maybe a half marathon in my life. So I'm not the ultra enduro athlete that kind of comes to adventure racing. I think I did my first 10-hour in 2014, then did another with a complete stranger in 2017. Fast forward, COVID, kids, watching Eco Challenge Fiji, which reminded me of the 1990s, and watching all the Eco Challenge with my dad, and was like, decided to do Jumara's first 24-hour event, Hard Fall. Had a blast. My body wasn't wrecked at the end. And so then the next obvious thing was, hey, maybe I can do Eco Challenge, or at least the Pennsylvania version of Eco Challenge. And so I try to trust in the universe. The universe is what brought me from Texas to Vermont. And when you ask the universe if you want to do something and it responds, then you can usually go with her. So I put it out on Facebook. I think maybe it was a Women of AR, and said, hey, I want to do this. Is it, here's my resume, which is not that detailed. Is anybody willing to take a chance on me? Found two women, Diana Driscoll and Donna Boots, formed a team, and there's a little bit more to the story, but that's what brought me to Endless Mountains. And it was, some of the best 5 days I've had in a long time, just being able to unplug fully, right? And focus on where am I eating, where am I sleeping, being with the people who, and just laughing a hell of a lot, almost falling out of my canoe on the last night because I had such giggle attacks. You don't always get that as an adult, and it's important to seize those opportunities.
And it took you 85 hours before you had them. So that's awesome. Folks, I have tried to go in and mute everybody, but there's a couple folks that I'm not getting the option to mute, and we're hearing a little bit of background noise. So if you could mute yourselves, that would be great. Jason, you're up.
What's up, everybody? Jason Glenn from Springfield, Missouri. I, similar to Megan, in the sense of Eco Challenge Fiji, cooped up during COVID. My wife and I came across that and had never heard of it, and immediately said, this is definitely something for us. So we did our first race here in Missouri that year, and I had an appetite for more. As we went along, my wife was not interested in longer, harder races, and so I kept climbing through and was debating when to make the jump. But when the opportunity came up to do this, it happened to come at a time when I was debating whether to do it or not, and it just so happened it started and ended in my hometown, 5 states away. So speaking of the universe, as Meg put it, that I thought that was saying something. So my wife pushed me into it, and with a ton of support from Brent and Abby, got there and enjoyed a lot of it. Really enjoyed it.
Well, and your wife came along and your daughters as ACE volunteers, which we
Oh
very
yes.
appreciated. Matt, go ahead.
Hey everybody, Matt from New Hampshire, and I have a very special relationship with Rootstock Racing, I'd say, because my very first adventure race was with them in 2018, the Atlantic City 14-hour, and so that was my first foray into racing, which was amazing with my friends Dave and JP Farley. And then the next year in 2019 was a 24-hour race that turned into a 30-hour race for us because I managed to get us so lost. And so that was my worst experience adventure racing. And then this past year, the 5-day, I'd say was my best adventure race. So Abby, you and Brent have run the gamut for me, first, best, and last for races. Not last, first, best, and worst, I'd say. It's been a great ride for me, adventure racing. I love it. I've done a couple of races throughout the Northeast, but I always try to make it down to the Rootstock races because they're just so well done, and it's been a great way to meet people who like to do challenging things. And it's nice to have people think you're a little crazy when you tell them what you just did over the weekend, over the last 5 days. So happy to be here.
Thanks, Matt. You are one of those folks that have been with us since the beginning, and we're always excited to see you on the start line. So some of you answered this question, and some of you kind of implied an answer, but what made you decide that now was the time? And then what was the time to dive into expedition racing? And then how did you approach it? Like, did you look at it as, oh my gosh, I'm doing this ridiculous thing and let's see how it goes? Did you have bigger goals than that? How did you kind of come to the race from a mental standpoint? And any of you can jump in.
I just wanted to push myself a little bit more. I always, when the 2 Rogaines or maybe a 24 or 36, I was like, how much could I go a little bit more? And I wanted to improve myself. So it started with that. So I hired a trainer to kind of, help me to get to the point where I could do this without hurting so much, for one, but really feel stronger at the end of the race. Because mentally I thought, I really, really enjoy being out here and doing all these different types of sports for one objective. So getting the trainer and kind of squaring those things away for the long term, I was like, you know what, maybe I should just keep pushing to see how far I could go. So it really helped getting that trainer. And then, I already had the want. I just want to be able to do the best that I can. And the trainer helped me, stay strong for those races.
Meg, am I right that the person you've worked with for coaching and training is Jen Sager, who's the official coach of the Endless Mountains?
Yes, she is. She started, probably been with her, I think, almost a year or so, because it started after 24. It was just wanted to keep going and do better, and I didn't know how to do it. So I looked into health, nutrition, and all kinds of things. Massive amount of podcasts and YouTube videos for all sorts of things. Podcasts were the best.
Awesome. Does anyone else want to add to the answers they gave in their bio about kind of how you came to the race mentally?
Yeah, I mean, I could. Oh, good. Go for it. You can't have Meg and Meg back to back.
So I knew that the race sign up was coming up, and my teammates, they asked me, and I was mad when they asked me because I knew it meant I had to do it. I couldn't turn it down. So I stared at the text for like 4 or 5 days, and I was like, okay, it's 5 days. I stared at this text. I'll be in the woods for 5 days. I can do this. And so I said, yeah, I'll do it. And I just started mentally preparing myself for like the time lapse, everything, because normally on a 24-hour race, I have my watch set. So every hour, it beeps, lets me know that I'm 1/24th of the way there. I knew that if I did that on a 5-day race, I'd go crazy. So I just started taking it event by event in my mind, and I tried to focus more on the experience of being out there with the people I was with versus kind of like a timed event, and that helped me a lot. I think it took a lot of the pressure off, and it was just like, all right, like I'm well trained, I'm well hydrated, I'm eating enough, like I can just kind of keep going. So I think the mental switch is an important aspect from a shorter race to a longer one for sure.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt. Megan, go ahead, and then Jason.
Yeah, I didn't have a coach. I've got a pretty crazy job and parent of 2 small kids, 7 and 3-year-old. And so a lot of it was like cramming in big blocks where I could, like get up early, work a full day, and then try to go out for 6 to 8 hours. Similar to Meg, every solo training thing I did, I had my earbuds in and was listening to Dark Zone or Burf Barf, and just absorbing all of the little tidbits that come up with those podcasts. They're so amazing. I think my main goals were really just to get across the finish line in my 46-year-old body and not have any new major injuries. And I was fully successful in doing that. And to just push myself. I really enjoy doing hard things. I think there's a podcast talking about sort of the intentionality of doing hard things with other people in the woods, which is beautiful. And I guess another big push for me was, again, coming out of COVID, parenting in COVID, working in COVID, and kind of being on that cusp that I think the New York Times talked about of I wasn't flourishing, I was kind of languishing, and I needed something to like pull me forward through where we were at with just a lot of heaviness from that experience. So thank you to Abby and Brent for facilitating, bringing some joy back into my life.
Yeah, similar to many of these people, I wanted to try something harder, wanted to try something different. I don't think I had the resume that most racers had. I had some races under my belt. I probably had just as many from the time I signed up until Endless Mountains. So I was a little perplexed of how to get from A to B. So I tried to leverage what everybody else did. I really put a lot of time into research online, podcasts. I scoured through all the adventure racing Facebook stuff. And as I said before, I cannot stress what a resource Brent and Abby were. They got a ton of messages from me, and it really helped to direct me in different directions and different ways of thinking of things, and kind of really almost mentored from a distance. And that kind of helped. But really, I think obviously training comes into play. My first thought was team. If you're going to do something for 5 days, I thought that's where this really began. So that's kind of my first step in this, was figuring out how to get a team together. I have some friends that do adventure racing, but I had no one had ever done an expedition race. So that kind of was perplexing to me. But again, Brent and Abby pointed me in the right direction, and I found a good way to start a team from that direction.
You guys are like running through the questions that I have prepared, which is great. The one person I think who didn't talk about how their team came together, Matt, you had this established team, and Megan and Jason, you kind of built a team from scratch for this specific race. Meg, you're in a bit of a unique situation, and I think it's an important perspective in that you jumped on a team with folks who had done expedition racing before. Can you talk a little bit about how that kind of contextualized your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. So this was my first, and this was Misty's first as well. But Sam and Mary were both experienced expedition racers. And I knew of Sam and I knew Mary from other races, and I'd seen Misty in the woods too. It's funny how small this, but how big this community is too. So I had an idea of, who they were as racers through my race partner, Matt Wilson as well. So it was, I was picking Mary's brain, and Mary, was willing to take me on as a race partner, knowing that I was also training with Jen Seggers, and she does as well. So she knew what I was some of my abilities were, and also from being friends with a race partner. So we kind of, our team kind of came from people that knew each other for the most part, and kind of fell into play. And we really worked well together, I thought, being new, but maintaining a lot of good communication throughout the race and beforehand as well. Even though we had never raced together, all four of us, we'd raced with other people, so we kind of had a general idea, but we also did a little bit of prep work beforehand.
I was going to add to that because we were a team of newbies, me, Diana, and Donna, and unfortunately Donna had to bow out at the last minute. And so again, the universe sort of supporting us. Sherry Himes and Pete Spagnoli also had lost people, and I knew Sherry from the clinic. And so functionally we moved as a group of four with, 2 newbies and 2 amazing mentors. And like knowing what I know now about what they brought to the experience, I wouldn't dissuade somebody from having an entire newbie team, but I think even if you had 3 newbies and 1 mentor, like that model, somebody who was willing to just teach you the ways, this is the way, Mandalorian style. I think that we really benefited from that, and I learned so much more by traveling alongside them. So I would give a shout out that if you know somebody who's willing to be that mentor and bringing them onto your team, your joy might be a little bit more than if you did it as a newbie team.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Megan. And Matt, I know you had a similar experience with Rick being the one person of the 4 of you who had done an expedition race. Meg, you might have wanted to jump in too.
I just said I learned exponentially from Sam and Mary. They really set the pace. They set our goals. So they really squared us away so we could fill in and learn because that's the biggest thing, is learning what your value is, or what you intend to bring to your team, how you're going to keep them up. And you're not, who knows that when you've never done this before? Sorry.
Matt, go ahead if you wanted to chime in.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say we had that experience because me and my two teammates, JP and Dave, were new to expeditionary racing, and Rick is very experienced. Rick's also a crazy person, like in the best way possible. Like Rick doesn't get tired, and so I knew that going into that, he was going to be pulling us throughout that entire course. And yeah, having Rick there, like essentially just being a backstop for all of our bad ideas was very, very comforting, because he's so good at everything that like we could just kind of relax and make sure that we were like really trying new things, and he would kind of put us, back in the box when we started to, get out there with our ideas or navigation ideas. He's like, you probably don't want to do that right now. And so having someone with that experience really took a lot of the stress off for us as well. And, just picking his brain on sleep plans, nutrition, when to push it, when not. I think it's been said, but having some experience on the team is great. You can definitely muscle through it, but it's a good confidence builder having someone like that.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks,
Just
Matt.
even the time management thing, sorry, of like 5 days, like that was one of my biggest things going in, is like, how do you know on day 2 whether to skip a point or whether to go on? And that was something that Sherry and Pete kind of like helped us with a lot. Their mind was working differently than I think ours was having done shorter races.
I want to spend some time, because you're all pointing to these decisions that you make during the race, which are so important, right, in jumping from a 24-hour race to a 5-day race. Before we get to that in-race experience, can you all talk a little bit about your training? This is a question that I think gets asked so often. How do you level up from training for a 1-day race to training for a 5-day race? Do you have a structured training plan like Meg? Do you work with a coach? And then this was a question actually that USARA posed to us ahead of time. How much did you use shorter races as part of your training?
I use them a lot. I took a lot of notes on every race that I did, temperature, elevation, distance, you know, what we were doing on each leg, the nutrition, what worked, what didn't. I read a lot of other people's notes on those races and see what they did as well. So that really helped me prep for a 5 because I already had an idea what did work and what didn't. And I made sure those feel good items were in my gearbox, and some options were in my gearbox too. Big time, keep race notes. Now, these are personal race notes, but I know a lot of people, it was just answering a question that had popped up. And some, I think on some of the Facebook websites, people do some recap of races, and so will podcasts like Burf Barf and Dark Zone. And they'll really talk about things that work. And if you can establish, you dial in a foot routine or a sleep routine, your sleep systems, gear systems, that is so helpful. Train with your gear, 100% train with your gear. Try to get out of the gym. I know that's hard, but train in bad weather, but really get outside and use everything. Nope. And I did, I still use something new on a race. Bad idea. Don't do that. Train with your gear.
Thanks, Meg. Does anyone else want to talk about their training and preparation?
I'm sure similar to everybody else, have very hectic work and personal life, and it was a struggle. I did it on my own. I didn't have a coach or a plan. I am a bit of a research nut, so I kind of put together a plan in conjunction with a couple of my teammates loosely. But to be honest with you, it comes down to what you have time for. We've all been there. You have a great plan for tomorrow and the day after, and your day goes to pot, and you just got to make the best of it. But in hindsight, I trained very hard. The best thing we did from a training standpoint is we wanted to hold each other accountable. My team did not know each other prior to joining up, and we were all in different states. So we joined a group on Strava, and I can't tell you how many nights you come in from work. It's 8 o'clock at night. No way am I working out. I'm too tired. And all of a sudden, your buddy just popped up a 20-mile ride. Like, got to go 25. I mean, I got to get out there and go. And so it really helped keeping each other accountable. With all of that said, I would train completely different. I don't think I trained correctly. I think I trained hard. I just trained incorrectly. I came into it focused on stamina. I did a lot of running. I barely ran the whole race. I lost a ton of weight in prepping for that, and I lost a lot of muscle mass and strength. And I think it was totally doable, but to do it again, I would have went into it with a little bit more strength and not get as lean going into the race, because that only further got worse as the race went on. I kept, losing weight. And so that would be a big change purely from a training standpoint. I'd probably focus a little bit more on strength training. But going back to what Meg just said, you got to get comfortable being uncomfortable. The days it's raining, the day it's snowing, it's cold, it's hot, those are the days to be out, because that's what's going to happen inevitably. And so I found opportunities to get my feet wet, to get muddy. And I think that made a big difference from an adversary standpoint.
I think, as I said, I didn't have a lot of time, so I would sort of block out 2 afternoons and maybe 1 weekend day and cram as much as I possibly could, little missions, solo missions into those days, and then maybe put together, I think I have a good base because I do CrossFit sort of year round and do the sort of grind type workouts. So would do some very short duration stuff on the other days, and somehow it served me okay. I definitely have a different training plan in mind for Endless Mountains number 2.0 to try to maybe certainly on the bike get more bike time in, because I think that was my weakness, and then also technical biking. The other thing I would strongly encourage everybody to do is I did at least 1, if not 2 night rides where we got up at 3 o'clock in the morning and went to the trails and rode and just got used to the feeling of doing that, on single track, especially as somebody who's not a technical mountain biker. Didn't want to be walking my bike the entire night if we were on trails because of being nervous about being in the dark. Having an indoor trainer, especially with kiddos, that's another big thing that I'm shifting. I had like an Echelon, but I just got a Wahoo. And I'm thinking, okay, well, even if I've got kiddo duty, I can get up at 4 and put 2 hours in, get a 2-hour ride in the basement, right? You got to do what you got to do for your teammates. So I think as a parent, you just fit it in where you can.
Matt, do you want to add anything to that?
I didn't really train. It's not that I'm a great athlete by any means. I didn't do much out of the ordinary. And the only reason I say that, the only reason I call myself out is just in case there's anyone listening who's intimidated by putting in a ton of hours and doesn't want to do it because they don't think they have the time. If you're creative, you can find ways to do it. If you're naturally active and you like doing outdoors things, you can definitely get yourself physically in shape. And I would argue that if you're interested in adventure racing, it is probably more of a mental hurdle than a physical hurdle for you. If you're already somewhat there and you've already done races, you kind of know what to expect. There was a question about, do you have to do long training sessions? Again, that's a mental thing. If you have mentally done a long training session, I think you're more apt to get through it. It's hard to physically train, in my opinion, for a super long training session, just like people don't train for a marathon by running a full marathon. Like it's kind of hard to replicate some of the stuff you do on the 5-day. Really, you want to just take care of your mind throughout those 5 days.
That's such an important point, Matt. Thank you for bringing that up, just how much the mental component. And as I think you said, Jason, just being comfortable, being uncomfortable.
Absolutely.
Becomes
Yeah,
the way
talking about long training sessions towards the closer end of things, when some of the details started coming out of some of the legs, I can't possibly reproduce the type of ride we're going to have or type of trek we're going to have. But not having that experience, kind of going off what he just said, I needed to mentally know I could. So I took a Saturday and rode 90 miles. I've never done it before. It wasn't going to be the same type of ride in the race, but it gave me mental strength. That's all it was. And so, I got some flack from some folks saying, that's pavement, it's not trails. Yeah, you're right. But you know what? I rode 90 miles and immediately knew, okay, I can do this. It might not be sexy or easy, but I can do it. And so I think some of that was creating mental strength, like he was just referring to. That I agree 100%. This is so much more mental than physical. Yes, if you want to come in first or second, there's a huge physical component to it. If this is just getting yourself prepared, it's, I think, 75, 80% mental preparation with the physical falling behind that.
I think you're right. I will say that the team that raced as Rootstock during this race, during the 22 race, they came off telling us they did not run anything and they finished third. So I think that question of like, how much running are you going to do? How much really hard pushing are you going to do? So much of it is going to be about efficiency, is going to be managing your time, managing your navigation, and managing the team.
How do I mute?
But you guys don't want to hear from me. You want to hear from the 4 folks who got to the finish line for the first time. Nemo just asked a question that I thought was critical. So many people, when they think about a 5-day race, they wonder, do I need to train for that level of sleep deprivation? How do I prepare myself for that? How do you get past that first night and then, have to go into night 2? So how did you approach sleep from a training and preparation standpoint? And then I think we can also think about that from the race itself perspective. How did you and your teammates decide to approach sleep?
I'll start. Our team actually, Sam and Mary both thought we've all done like a 24 or 36, so we were going to push and potentially have our first sleep within 48 hours or so. So we set that goal in the beginning. Training for not sleeping is really hard. But then again, life, I know a lot of people, have spent, up nights with kids or up nights studying or doing whatever, where you could be, a week or so with having, very little sleep. It's surprising. The sleep aspect of it didn't really bother me throughout the race. I don't remember that being, oh my God, I'm so tired. Even though the last portion in the canoe where I've never fallen asleep paddling, but I did. But it really wasn't an issue, but I didn't train for it either. I think just life in general trains you for the lack of sleep.
Thanks, Meg. Matt, go ahead.
Yeah, Abby, I think actually you gave us some advice before the race started, either you or Brent, and you talked about the importance of getting a REM cycle. And I love that because before my current job, I spent 10 years in the Marine Corps. And so there's a lot of like 20, 30-minute naps wherever we could get them. And I always hated that. I was dreading that for this 5-day race. Like I was like, I don't operate well that way. It feels terrible. And then when you put some science behind it and you said, get a REM cycle and just do 2 hours, 2.5 hours, whatever, you'll feel better. That made a ton of sense. And we abided by that throughout the 5 days. And all four of us came away from the race amazed at how good we felt each day. I mean, we were tired, but like we weren't like falling asleep while we were walking tired. So I think that was a super important hint for us to get.
Matt, am I remembering that you were one of the teams that spent one of your sleeps in a hotel? You didn't? Okay.
No, we didn't. But I mean, if that's allowed, then we should have.
We tried, but the motel closed, and so we
Okay.
ended up on a lawn.
We do it every opportunity we can. If we happen to pass something, we will absolutely take advantage of that.
That's smart.
I didn't think of that at all.
So next year, if you see a hotel on the course, when we get to that last question of what do you wish you knew for the first one that you now know. Jason or Megan, do you want to talk a little bit about sleep?
Megan, go ahead.
I mean, I think we slept a fair amount. I think we were trying to sleep maybe an hour and a half for a REM cycle the first night. I think we were all still jittery, and so it wasn't really good quality sleep. I think the main thing was we were going to try to sleep in the dark and when it was a good time to sleep, and to get, a 3, maybe 4 hour chunk. Of course, I think looking back, you have to think about the sort of sleep part and the bedding down and then the packing up. And so that turns into maybe 4 or 5 hours. But, and I think we debated a lot. Sherry had some different viewpoints, but like, I think I had my lightweight pad, my bivy in my bag with me at all times so that when we were sleeping, I wasn't fighting for space in a tent. I was pretty warm and cozy, comfortable. And so like carrying around the extra weight to make sure that if we did bed down, it was good quality sleep. The one thing that I don't know that you can train for, and that was a little bit of surprise, I can't remember which night it was after the trek and we got back on the bike. And I think I was really tired and really, really needed to sleep. And riding my bike on a roadway downhill where it was sort of hypnotic made me extremely anxious. Because like my body was like, you're going to fall asleep and you're on a road and you're going fast. And so turned into going extremely slowly, like embarrassingly slowly, but it is what it is. And eventually I was just like, I can't, like, we're either going to keep going at 2 miles an hour or we need to sleep so that I can recharge and get ready to go. So like, that's one of my, I think Sherry had said that you kind of just get used to that feeling as an expedition racer, like your body accommodates to knowing that yes, you're tired, but you're okay. And I was having a hard time like convincing my body that I wasn't gonna go kersplat, I think, on the pavement, which is something I would prefer not to do. So I don't know if training could get, I don't know if training is gonna simulate that 3-day, night tiredness after you've been on your feet for a long time. So it may just be something you're gonna have to just push through.
Thanks, Megan.
Okay.
Jason, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, so I'll tell you, we spent a lot of time in the early stages kind of coming up with a sleep strategy. And ultimately, we thought of everything in bulks of REM cycles. Like you said, we're going to get a single REM cycle. We're going to get 2 sleep cycles in. However, we could get some quality of sleep. We kind of think of it like that. I'm sure the top tier teams have it down pat, but somebody else just said it before. The deceiving part to that was when you're tired and exhausted and not thinking straight, how long it takes to unpack, get all this stuff put together, get bedded down and put back together. That was probably, if 2 hours of sleep was probably 4 hours. We just did not account for how long that would take. And it sounds simple here to say, well, yeah, just streamline it. Being inexperienced, we struggled with that. And looking back, that added a lot more of our time. The other thing is we came into it with a loose plan, but we wanted to be flexible. I mean, you don't know where you're going to be in the TA. Yeah, you have a loose plan, but maybe you want to go a little further. Maybe you want to plow through the night and sleep in the morning. So we tried to be flexible. If I have any skill in this sport, it is I'm able to go with minimal sleep and I can sleep anywhere. So, but on the flip side, this is a team-based sport and some people can't do that. So you need to be flexible to your teammate, just like, you know, you can't go any faster than the slowest biker. You can't go any longer than the person with the least amount of sleep. So we tried to accommodate both ends of that spectrum. But if I personally were to redesign the race again, I would have cut back our sleep dramatically because I thought that was the one thing we lost a lot of time on, but it was for various reasons logistically. So, but that would be an opportunity we would have had to do it differently.
Thanks, Jason. I got a direct message in the chat asking for a little bit more information on the REM cycle. So just to dive into that a little bit, my understanding, I'm not a brain scientist, but I do have a teammate who is. Nikki Driscoll has shared that it's about 90 minutes for a REM cycle. So if you kind of time your sleep in 90-minute or a little bit more increments, then you are benefiting from the natural rhythms of kind of in and out of deep sleep. Our team has always used the approach, and we've gotten this advice from a number of incredibly experienced racers, that you sleep kind of an hour to survive, 2 hours to maintain, and 3 or 4 hours to race. So if you want to get some of that actual recovery in terms of not just your mental state, but also your physical state, we typically try to find 3-hour blocks for sort of starting after the first night and maybe until the last night. We don't always sleep the last night, but that's how our team typically approaches sleep. And there are many others that try to go on substantially less. I'm posting in the chat a series that Brent and I put together last year called the Expedition Playbook, which really goes through kind of step-by-step preparing for the race, logistics for the race, in-race experience, kind of our tips and tricks that we have gleaned from 15 years of adventure racing and from the wealth of knowledge from the entire community. So we're actually going to start updating those to have a little bit of information about this upcoming year's race instead of last year's race, and we'll start putting them out again, but the information is all there. We've had a couple questions about that logistical coordination. One of them was about packing food boxes, kind of preparing, organizing equipment. And the other one is, I think, something that we kind of take for granted when we've done enough expedition racing, but like, how do you plan your lights, right? How do you deal with batteries? How do you make sure that you have the equipment to sustain you over 5 days rather than just the 24-hour race that we all kind of get into as our first entry point, or most of us get into as our first entry point to overnight racing? So how did you all approach that?
Our team coordinated. We had a couple Zoom sessions prior to the race, and we coordinated. We send out, I forget what format it was. Maybe it was an Excel file or something of everything that we were bringing. So batteries, we were all lucky to have a similar light system. So we all had backup batteries, extra batteries. So if somebody, needed one out in the trail somewhere, we all had something just in case. I had them in the transition box. Food, we were all kind of different because we each kind of ate and fueled differently too. But we all offered food to each other. Just in case somebody, because at the end of the 5 days, you don't care what you eat, you just need to eat. But organize that food too, organize your whole gearbox to some degree. So you're quick in transition too. But I kept bags of 6 and 12 hours, 3, 6 and 12 for food, depending on the length of the leg. You really don't need a 3-hour, that's rare, but stuffed snacks everywhere.
Thanks, Meg. Anyone else want to chime in on those logistics and organizational questions?
Yeah. We divided our batteries up. We labeled them, like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then we split those evenly among the boxes. So good on us doing that. What we didn't do was we didn't test the new batteries that we bought from a vendor before the race. So we charged them, and then they were like supposed to be like 8 or 9 hour batteries, and they lasted like 11 minutes. So don't do that. I think labeling is good, but maybe try them out first. Don't buy them the week before the race.
Megan or Jason, any tricks that worked well for your team or totally failed for your team?
You want to go, Meg?
So you go for it.
So I'll tell you, one of the successes I think we had is we thought of everything in 12-hour windows. That's it. We didn't complicate it. We started out with exactly what she just said a second ago, 3, 6, and 12, and we abandoned that. And everything we did was in 12-hour windows. So kind of a data geek myself, I kind of knew what our typical times, my typical time was. So if I thought we were going to be out for a day and a half, that's 3 12-hour packs. That's 3 12-hour packs of food. We did the same thing with clothes. So we knew you're going to get wet. You got to take care of your feet. You got to kind of do those small things to keep going. And so clothes were in 12-hour packs. I mean, we had stock in Ziploc. So everything was organized in these packs. And so you came to transition area, grabbed the correct number of food bags, all done ahead of time. We knew exactly in loose terms what calorie count was in each one, so we could keep up with that, and grab the correct number of clothes packs, and out the door you went. And that was probably the most organized thing we did the whole race, and that took the edge off. That was something we really fretted about. I saw somebody put on here, I'm most nervous about packing boxes of food, and I'll tell you, we were too, and that was a lifesaver. That came from many sources, but heard it over and over again on the Dark Zone podcast, and they just said different races, 3-hour packs, 6-hour packs for smaller races. But for this length race, at least for our team or for me personally, that worked out the best. And then you already had a garbage bag to put all your stuff in with the Ziplocs. I mean, it kept things watertight. It worked fantastically.
Yeah, I think when I went into it, because I am a logistical person, I thought I was going to be a lot more refined, but one of my lessons learned is that I didn't sleep enough in the 3 days before, and I didn't eat enough because I was packing, unpacking. Did I already pack that? Like trying to come up with a system that you trust, that you know that when you put this in this bag, that you know that it's there. I was leaving myself little notes. I don't know I've certainly bonked when I was younger, and I guess maybe some part of me really doesn't ever want to bonk because I probably had way more food than I needed. Like I probably had enough food for 7 days. So that coordination with your teammates to kind of know that collectively you have enough food would have been good. Same thing with lights. I probably had enough lights to power multiple teams for multiple days because I was afraid. One of my biggest lessons was to not like the balance of over preparing versus just knowing that if something fails or you put something in the wrong box, you're going to be okay. Somebody else is going to have it. You're going to figure it out. Like to maybe stress a little less about my race is only going to work if I brought this thing. I'm just going to name out loud. I mean, because we all fuck up, right? So some of our anxiety is about making sure we're being fully prepared for our team because we need to do that. I left the goddamn course book in the hotel. Like I left the key piece of equipment and did not realize it until we were on the bus. And so I got to learn the very early lesson of like, I fucked up, I own it, and we're moving on because there's nothing you can do about it. You know, it's like I could have did a little quick shame spiral and then pulled myself back out of it and figured out what to do. And I don't know, that was a very important lesson because I'm sure I'm going to forget something in some other race, and you just need to be able to recover quickly and move on.
Yeah, that Meg, that's a great point. I over prepared as well. I mean, I even wrote myself notes for each box, like basically like, all right, I'm lucid right now. I'm going to write this note. So when I'm sleep deprived, I know what I need to do. I never looked at those notes. It was almost like when you're allowed to write on an index card before a test, you kind of internalize the information, right? So once you get going, you're just like, okay, like Jason was saying, you know, like you got food, you got water, you got clothes, and you got your team, and you're out the door, you're ready to go. So I think you can definitely get in your own head during the planning the logistical portion of it, especially for the first expedition race. But I would say don't worry about it. You're gonna walk around in the woods. You're gonna get wet. You're gonna get tired. You're gonna hop on a bike. You're gonna get wet. You're gonna get tired, and then you're gonna hop in a canoe, and you're gonna get wet. You're gonna get tired. But you're gonna have iodine tablets, so you're gonna have water, and you're gonna have food on you, so you're not gonna go hungry. And you'll have a sleeping bag, so you can sleep when you get tired. Everything else will work itself out.
And if you run out of food, you learn about pouch chicken. Like I knew about pouch tuna, but I had never experienced the beauty of pouch chicken. And now I know, although now I'm really a favorite of pouch tuna that's pre-flavored with chorizo. So that I might be back on the tuna train.
Next year, you level up and mix the packed tuna with ramen.
Ooh.
So just one quick note on bins, because this is something that's really variable race to race. Some races give you like 2 bins per team and they tell you which transition areas you're going to see them. Other races give you a bit like 4 bins or the number you have per person, but you don't see every bin at the same time. For Endless Mountains last year, each person had a bin and all of the bins were in the same place. So you each had your own personal bins. We have not finalized those logistics for next year, but I anticipate that being the same. So that's just something y'all can keep in mind as you're thinking about the race. We have a couple more questions that came into the chat that I'm just gonna pose at once, and y'all can answer as much or as little of them as you want. And then I have a final question that I want to wrap up. But before I get there, Brian Menard asked, will we have an Expedition Playbook article on carrying and packing a pack raft while biking and hiking? I don't anticipate you having to carry your pack rafts while biking. And if there becomes a situation during next year's race where you will be required to pack your rafts for an extended period of time, we can definitely put some material out on that. But you did have to carry your pack rafts a little bit for this race. Is that right, or am I mixing up our races? Did you guys have to carry your pack rafts at all?
You could have had the opportunity, I think, to deflate and then do the trekking points, but some people didn't end up doing that. So there was a little bit of option if you weren't quite set up to carry them.
At the end of Curwensville Lake, thank you. So if you all have experience with packing your rafts and moving efficiently with those, feel free to answer it within these questions. The other 2 questions were, do you have desk jobs or do you have like physically demanding jobs that require you to be on your feet a lot? And how did that, I'm inferring from that question, how did that affect your training? And then can you talk a little bit about the challenge of carrying what you might need versus carrying too much? There's this great quote, I think it's from the Dark Zone, basically like you pack your fears, right? So if you're worried you're going to be too cold, then you pack extra clothes. If you're worried you're going to be too hungry, then you pack extra food. How did you find that balance?
Abby, I had no balance. I packed everybody's fears in my bag. I would put serious money that I had the heaviest bag of all racers. It was one of my worst mistakes. My pack was too big, too heavy, and that would be a top 5 things I would change going into this next time. No matter what anybody else said on the team, I felt like I had to have a redundancy for myself and for my teammates. So extra batteries, extra food, extra clothes, I had it all. I had a walking pharmacy. I had a level 1 trauma kit. I mean, I had everything. It was absurd. I didn't grasp how often you'd get back to your stuff. So really, to what Matt just said, what can you get? You can survive for the next 6 or 12 hours for the most part. I mean, if it's that bad, we're hitting that GPS button anyways. So for those of you that aren't aware, we do have a crisis, oh crap button for the worst of the worst. So really some basic stuff you need, yes, but you do not need to have a walking Walmart in your pack. And that's what I had. And that makes it difficult, to bike and pack and row with 60 pounds on your back. So yeah, you do not need to go that route, I can assure you. And that was I went into it with a brand new pack. I messed with packs for 2 solid months and still the day before the race made a mad dash to Pittsburgh to buy yet another pack. So that won't happen again.
Jason,
That was me with shoes. I was like
Really?
getting shoes and shoes and shoes. Like, is this the shoe? Is that the shoe?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
What pack did you end up with, Jason?
Honestly, Abby, I returned 6 after the race. I can't even tell you which one I used at this rate. I had a frame. It was big. I ran out of options. I would probably look at going with what's the one you and Brent run with typically?
The Hyperlite.
Hyperlite. I think I would try that next time. I know there's not a lot of support, but I'd take that for less weight, I think. So I think that's what I would try next time.
Great. Anyone else want to chime in? Pack size came up in the chat also, so you can throw that in as you're answering the other questions.
I love
that.
Ultimate Directions. Their packs, Ultimate Direction, they just really fit well. When I train with them, I really had no issue with blisters or any chafing underneath unless the clothing's off. I think I have a 40 or a 45 that I used for the 5-day, and that worked out really well. I always carry extra food. I'm always going to do that. I got to eat. And I find when I'm really grinding down and having a hard time, eat. It really helps me out. I also always carry an extra layer because I get cold really easy. I have not figured that out yet. As soon as I start sweating and burning calories during the day, that was the hardest thing, trying to sleep at night. And June was still pretty warm, but I was shaking at night, so I couldn't sleep well. So that's something I have to figure out, but I always carry an extra layer. So I wouldn't do that less. The one thing I would is maybe 2 to 3 liters. I always have a 3 liter to some extent, but maybe backing off a little bit. Water is definitely important, but when you have a lot of water on the course, that BeFree filter, or a couple of those, if your team has those, just stop for water breaks a little more often. Maybe you don't have to carry as much, but I wouldn't say don't carry as much water either.
That's right. I had the Out There 30 liter, which did me pretty well. My only fear was if we were going to have to carry pack rafts. I can't get a pack raft in those puppies. And then I had the same realization about the water. I've always had too much water, and I did end up, there was some podcast that talked about using water bottles so that you're really aware of how much water you have. That worked well. And one of the things I've been looking at the Hyperlite, but trying to figure out how to have the same setup of water bottles in front as easily, and all of the accessory pockets, which I really like on the Out There pack, by is it my Closure. So it's a nice pack. I don't know if we're answering your question. And I definitely have a desk job. I try to remember to do my stand-up desk, but I am budgeting and writing memos, for a long time a day. So it's definitely possible. Don't have to be a landscaper in order to be successful.
I know that there are landscapers on this call. Hi, Keith. And Mary Chandler these days is also a landscaper. So there's I'm jealous because they're like training all the time. But
speaking of Out There and packs, that I like I said, I bought a bunch of packs, and is it Mike Closer from Out There? Yeah. This guy has bent over backwards for me. He's taken stuff back well past when he should have or could have for me. But he gave me a bunch of advice. He's done this stuff before. He also said to me at one point when I said about running, he said, "Why are you running with this pack to begin with?" So that was kind of an eye-opening experience. But he had said, you have this need to put everything in your pack, and that's not the case. He said, "What is your fear?" So, what if I have to carry the pack raft like we talked about? You get straps, you strap it on underneath. You don't have to have everything in your pack. Who cares if some of these things are outside your pack? And again, obvious now, but at the time of packing your anxieties, I'm thinking I have to have everything neatly organized in this pack. And I can't tell you how many people, here I am with this huge pack, and I'm passing many people with that Out There 30 liter pack. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I could carry 3 of their bags in mine. So I do not think you need to have a rucksack from the Marines to get through this. I think it is, I'm reading people's comments here. They're all my fears as I'm reading through here a year ago at this time. And I can tell you, unless you're independently wealthy or retired and have nothing but spending cash, this can get very expensive, as everybody has seen. I'm telling you, you do not need to have the best of things. I'm sure some teams do, and maybe that gives them some advantages, but I got through, I chose where to spend my money. I could have spent on top dollar lights. I didn't. I got cheap Amazon lights and had 0 problems, 0. And I ran off AAA batteries that weighed nothing. So you don't have to have the best of everything to do this. Choose where you want to spend your money. Maybe you want a better bike, but you want to skimp on the light. So don't get discouraged by the cost. Yes, some of this is expensive, but you don't have to go platinum across the board to cross the finish line.
Let me just throw in a plug there for USARA membership, because that comes with a subscription to Expert Voice, which is a kind of consortium of gear brands that offer pro deals through this program. So for your $35 USARA membership, your very first order with Expert Voice will more than pay for that membership. And if you have questions about that, feel free to reach out to info@usara.com. We are coming up on the end of our hour. We started at 8:08, so let's end at 9:08. What's next for you guys? I know, Matt, I know the answer to that because you're already registered for next year's Endless Mountains, but was this a one and done, guys, or do you see yourself doing more multi-day racing in the future?
Definitely planning on signing up, just saving up my cash so I can pay the fee. Definitely spent a lot of money gearing up, and so I don't think I have. Hopefully next Endless will be a little less heavy on the pocketbook, because I've got a lot of the gear now. So absolutely we'll be there next June. Excited about it.
I think we have a team ready for Endless, and I'm kind of hoping still that we'll be able to do Expedition Ozarks too. I hope. So it's going to be a little pretty interesting next year, but yeah, this is fun.
How about you, Jason?
So if we haven't touched on it before, kind of backtracking before I answer, I cannot stress how much of a social sport this is, in at least expedition style. You know, you can run your 24 on your own or a couple of days, but this is going to most likely be at least with one other person or 3 other people. And so this is all about a social game. It's about having the right support, the right teammates. And we had a really good team. We made some last minute changes that probably added additional stress. So I think, again, if you're on the fence about doing this, you really need to put a lot of time and focus into who you're going to do the race with. Make sure they have the same goals as you. And I don't think you have to have the same experience. I do agree with everybody else. It'd be ideal to have someone that had an expedition race under their belt. I also can tell you none of us did, and we made it across. That wasn't our obstacles. The social component is a huge part of this. I think I would argue it's bigger than experience and bigger than physicality. So I put it up there with mental. And so I think it's about having the right team. And we had a really good team. I think we just made last minute adjustments to our roster. And so I would say, find a team, stick with it. And that's, I think if I can get the right team together and bring the right players in, I think we're considering coming back.
Awesome. And I want to highlight what Megan just said. This is an incredibly expensive sport, and we know that registration for Endless Mountains is not inconsequential. If there are folks on here who are planning on signing up, interested in signing up, but need to work with us in terms of like spreading out payments or anything like that, just reach out and we can set that up. We did it for a few folks last year. Just send an email to rootstockracing@gmail.com. Any final words? All right. Well, thank you.
No, I'll just say, if you're on the fence, do it.
Just do it.
What
Yeah.
do you have to lose? Like, you're going to learn a lot, even if you only go out there and it's only 3 days. You're going to learn a lot about yourself and be able to get back out. But with the very accessible races, but also challenging races, as we saw with the top teams taking longer than I think they had anticipated to complete the course, it's a doable race. And again, just really appreciate Abby and Brent putting together that sort of continuum experience so that new folks can get out there and enjoy themselves, and elite athletes can also go out there and get their butt kicked, as is their due. So yeah, just do it. If you're on the fence, why not? Life is short.
It'll definitely be a bucket list item. Don't pass it up.
Yep.
You're not going to find one done with this quality of race directing. That's what separated this apart. There's no question in my mind. I did it and finished solely because of their mentorship and their race director concept. I mean, this was laid out so well. If there's ever a time you're considering it, this is the one you want to do, hands down.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate those kind words. We will continue to have webinars like this. We have one coming up with Jen Sager, who, as I said at the beginning, is the official coach of the Endless Mountains, and she will offer just some general tips on training and answer any questions that you have. And then we'll have another one as we get closer to the race on nutrition and preparation, also with Jen. And if there's stuff you want to see that we can help put together, just reach out. Thank you all for joining us and for being flexible with the tech today. Have a good night.
Good night, all. See you out in the